it's also important that we have the voice of the consumers in this discussion. And we are all here in the Parliament willing to listen to the consumer organization and also learn from them, because they really have the finger in the pie. But we also have to remember that the consumers are not politicians, and sometimes the consumer organization is politicizing themselves a little, so we need to separate who has the mandate and who has not the mandate. I think that's important to underline.
We live in a consumer age, an age where you can walk into a supermarket, look at all the products on offer, and you can say, my God, no king ever had anything like this. We have this fantastic market. Today, many of our trading partners from third countries pay dearly for access to our 470 million consumers, consumers who represent something like 60% of Europe's GDP.
According to my humble experience of the first 10 months in the office, there is no such case as an ideal country. And I would like to tell you that the same belief that we are the best is typical for the South and for the North, for West and for East. And if you see what is the number of infringements and how many countries will succeed to have unfair commercial practices in place before the end of the year, you will see that unfortunately, again, there is no ideal country.
The general interest of consumers in the common market are not represented to the same extent as are those of the consumers, of those of the producers. And by coincidence, the year after BEUC was founded. However, the first problem we face now in representing the consumer interest on a political level is actually that the consumer's interest is a fairly general, or one could even say diffuse, interest. And as a contrast, and whenever we work on a particular issue, we are opposed by very specific interests. So these will be people, firms, and organizations who can and do devote all their time to promote and defend just this one interest.
Sometimes that competition itself first has to be created. If you look at energy markets, for example, that seems not yet to be the case. But energy is not the only area suffering from that lack. And it is regrettable. If you look at the new recommendations in the EU Reform Treaty, namely the reference to undistorted competition has been relegated to an ancillary protocol.
I would like to talk about internal market that works for consumers and business. We don't see an internal market that works for one or the other only. We believe that the internal market exists for both, and we also see the benefits that have been produced over the years. They have benefited consumers and companies.
We think it's very important that consumers be able to have confidence in the fact that there's fair competition, that if their rights are infringed, they will be able to gain some sort of redress. I think all of this is absolutely imperative if we want the free economy and free and undistorted competition to have a future in Europe. Confidence in the market is absolutely essential to internal trade. So we therefore want informed consumers, and we have to be able to create the right market conditions in order to have informed, rational decisions taken on the part of consumers when they're buying goods and services.
Consumers have a formidable advocate in Europe, the European Parliament and its elected members. You represent the European citizens and consumers. It is your political mandate to look after their interest. So today's seminar is a very appropriate place to ask what the single market does for the consumer. Consumer policy and internal market policy need to work hand in hand. Our success will depend on whether consumers are satisfied with their experience of the single market, with the goods and services they buy every day. And yet there is evidence to show that we need to do more. Consumers do not use all the opportunities the single market offers them. European citizens barely use the internal market for financial services. Only 3% have ever considered buying a financial product or taking out an insurance contract in another EU country?
We, as a SSC, SSC Network, already made 2 reports. The latest was published last year, and it was based on 4,000 cases. The main findings were non-delivery of products, received defect products, problem with payments and redress. There are also many other examples, but now I would like to concentrate on the internet auctions, which in fact are not covered by consumer legislation, but it also shows general e-commerce problem.
I highlight this issue because I do think that while you often hear that the European Commission is indeed considered to be the guardian of the treaty and should look after the proper implementation and enforcement of European law, I do think that there is a role for the other institutions and specifically also for the European Parliament to help the Commission in carry out its enforcement tasks. The Commission points out in that same communication that all institutions have an interest in the application of community law, and we would therefore encourage the European Parliament to engage in the Commission's proposed interinstitutional dialogue on the extent to which community law achieves its objectives, the problems encountered, and possible solutions to be applied. I think that members of parliament, through your unique links with national constituencies, you can have a crucial role in ensuring that European legislation is properly implemented and enforced. Another point that we have addressed is that exemptions have been adopted sometimes at European level. For instance, on financial services have been exempted from some directives, immovable property contracts have been exempted. We think that the rationale for coming to these exemptions must be the same across the European Union. So we always wonder why then, when it is implemented, member states feel the need to again implement these exemptions differently. And again, that affects the level playing field within the European Union.
I have always been keen, since I've been here, on promoting all sorts of ADR, and I think the work that the consumer centres do is absolutely great. I think the work that the Commission organisation Solvit does is absolutely wonderful. But I go back to where I started, about a coherent legal framework. And that means when the consumer that goes to the consumer centre or the constituent that comes to me has a problem where something isn't working, they should be able to know the clear legal pathway to get redress when it's cross-border. They shouldn't be sent from pillar to post, from trader to producer to guarantor to whatever. There should be a clear pathway that we all know what it is. There should be a clear way of obtaining redress. In fact, after what we experienced with Equitable Life, I would be an advocate of saying that in EU legislation, you need clear EU-level remedies so that citizens know what they can do to put things right.
And I must say to the industry that I have been very much, I've been the competition spokesperson for the ALDE group, so I have followed the competition policy very closely. And if you look at the cartels, I mean, you have it within airfares. And if you are a normal consumer, I mean, you don't have the time, the money to go and ask for compensation. And I think one of the ways that we also could educate and train the industry so that they don't make those agreements to the non-benefit of the consumers and the internal market. That is, that they can have the threat of having a collective redress, so that instead of only have one consumer doing, then a whole of consumers. So it will be, both the money will be a lot, but also the brand of the business.